Hello, guys, and welcome back to Leo's Lifestyle. We're at it again with another Berkshire Hathaway letters to shareholders. This one's our 1988. Today, just so you guys are aware of the a little difference here, because I'm not on my main computer or in the bedroom, but I am doing a little testy test here because we're leaving for Mexico in 2 days, and so I want to make sure that on Friday I'll be able to do the reading for the Berkshire Hathaway. That is not why I skipped it last Friday. I was just being lazy. I didn't do it. So we got to catch up this Monday. It's in the evening. I'm doing it now. Whoop-de-woo, okay? But let's take a little sip of water here and get into it. Okay. Our gain in net worth during 1988 was 569 million, or 20% over the last 24 years. That is, since present management took over, our per share book value has grown from $19.46 to $2,974.52, or at a rate of 23% compounded annually. We've emphasized in past reports that what counts, however, is intrinsic business value. The future necessarily the future necessarily an estimate indicating what all of our constitute businesses are worth. But our calculations, Berkshire's intrinsic business value significantly exceeds its book value. Over the 24 years, business value has grown somewhat faster than book value. In 1988, however, book value grew the faster by a bit. Berkshire's past rates of gain in both book value and business value are achieved under circumstances far different from those that now exist. Anyone ignoring these differences makes the same mistake that a baseball manager would, where he too judged the future prospects of a 42-year-old center fielder on the basis of his lifetime batting average. Important negatives affecting our prospects today are: 1. A less attractive stock market than generally existed over the past 24 years. 2. Higher corporate tax rates on most forms of investing income. 3. A far more richly priced market for the acquisition of businesses. 4. Industry conditions for capital-cited ABCs, Inc., Geico Corporation, and the Washington Post Company, Berkshire's three permanent investments constituting about one-half of our net worth, that range from slightly a material less favorable than those existing 5 to 10 years ago. All of these companies have superb management and strong properties, but at current prices, their upside potential looks considerably less exciting to us today than it did some years ago. The major problem we face, however, is a growing capital base. You've heard that from us before, but this problem, like age, grows in significance each year. And also, just as with age, it's better to have the problem continue to grow rather than to have it, quote unquote, solved. For 4 years ago, I told you that we needed profits of 3.9 billion to achieve a 15 annual return over the decade then ahead. Today, for the next decade, a 15% return demands profits of 10.3 billion. That seems likely a very big number to me and to Charlie Munger, Berkshire's vice chairman and my partner. Should the number indeed prove too big, Charlie will find himself in future reports retrospectively identified as a senior partner. As a partial offset of the drag that our growing capital base experts upon returns, we have a very important advantage now that we lacked 24 years ago. Then, all of our capital was tied up in a textile business with inescapable poor economic characteristics. Today, part of our capital is invested in some really exceptional businesses. Last year, we dubbed these operations the Satin Seven: Buffalo News, Fresher's, Kirby, Nebraska Furniture Mart, Scott Fitzer's Manufacturing Group, Seas, and World Books. In 1988, the Saints came marching in. You can see just how extraordinary their returns on capital were by examining the historical cost financial statements on page 45, which, combined with figures of the Saintage 7 with those of several smaller units with no benefit from the financial leverage this group earned about 67% on average equity capital. In most cases, the remarkable performance of these units arises partially from an exceptional business franchise. In all cases, an exceptional management is a vital factor. The contribution Charlie and I make is to leave these managers alone. In my judgment, these businesses, in aggregate, will continue to produce superb returns. We'll need these. Without this help, Berkshire would not have a chance of achieving our 15% goal. You can be sure that our operating managers will deliver. The question mark in our future is whether Charlie and I can effectively employ the funds that they generate. In that respect, we took a step in the right direction early in 1989 when he purchased an 80% interest in Borsheim's, a jewelry business in Omaha. This purchase, described later in this letter, delivers exactly what we took for an outstanding business run by people we like, admire, and trust. It's a great way to start the year. Accounting changes. We have made a significant accounting change that was mandated for 1988 and likely will have another to make in 1990. When we move figures around from year to year without any change in economic reality, one of our always thrilling discussions of accounting is necessary. First, I'll offer my customary disclaimer. Despite the shortcomings of generally accepting accounting practices, GAAP, I would hate to have the job of devising a better set of rules. The limitations of the existing set, however, need not to be inhibiting. CEOs are free to treat GAAP statements as a beginning rather than an end to their obligations to inform owners and creditors. And indeed they should. After all, any manager of a subsidiary company would find himself in hot water if he reported bare-bones GAAP numbers that omitted key information needed by his boss, the parent corporation CEO. Why, then, should the CEO himself withhold information vitally useful to his boss, the shareholder owners of the corporation? What needs to be reported is data, whether GAAP, non-GAAP, or extra GAAP. That helps financial literate readers answer three key questions. 1. Approximately how much is the company worth? 2. What is the likelihood that it can meet its future obligations? And 3. How good a job are its managers doing given the hand they have been dealt? In most cases, answers to one or more of these questions are somewhere between difficult and impossible to glean from the minimum GAAP presentation. The business world is simply too complex for a single set of rules to effectively describe economic reality for all enterprises, particularly those operating in a wide variety of businesses such as Berkshire. Further complicating the problem is the fact that many management view GAAP not as a standard to be met, but as an obstacle to overcome. Too often, their accountants willingly assess them, quote unquote, how much, says the client, quote unquote, is 2 plus 2, question mark, replies the cooperative accountant, quote, what number did you have in mind, end quote. Even honest and well-intentioned management sometimes stretch GAAP a bit in order to present figures they think will more appropriately describe their performance. Both the soothing of earnings and the quote-unquote big bath quarter are quote-unquote white lies technically employed by otherwise upright managers. Then there are managers who actively use GAAP to deceive and defraud. They know that many investors and creditors accept GAAP results as gospel. So these charlatans interpret I can interpret the rules, quote unquote, imaginatively and record businesses' transactions in ways that technically comply with GAAP, but actually display an economic illusion to the world. As long as investors, including supposedly sophisticated institutions, place fancy valuations on reported quote unquote earnings that march steadily upward, you can be sure that some managers and promoters will exploit GAAP to produce such numbers, no matter what the truth may be. Over the years, Charlie and I have observed many accounting-based frauds of straggler size. Few of the perpetrators have been punished. Many have not even been censored. it has been far safer to steal large sums with a pen than small sums with a gun. Under one major change mandated by GAAP for 1988, we have under we have been required to fully consolidate all of our subsidiaries in our balance sheet and earning statements. In the past, Mutual Savings and Loans and Scott Fitzer Financial, a credited company that primarily finances installment sales of World Book and Kirby products, were consolidated on a quote-unquote one-line basis. That meant we, one, showed our equity in their combined net worth as a single entry asset on Berkshire's consolidated balance sheet, and two, included our equity in their combined annual earnings as a single line income entry in our consolidated statement of earnings. Now, the rule requires that we consolidate each asset and liability of these companies in our balance sheet and each item of their income and expense in our earnings sheet. This change underscores the need for companies also to report segment data. The greater the number of economically diverse business operations lumped together in controversial financial statements, the less useful those presentations are, and the less able investors are to answer the three questions posed earlier. Indeed, the only reason we ever prepare consolidated figures at Berkshire is to meet outside requirements. On the other hand, Charlie and I constantly study our segment data. Now that we are required to build more numbers in our GAAP statement, we have decided to publish additional supplementary information that we think will help you measure both businesses' value and managerial performance, Berkshire's ability to discharge its obligation to creditors, and the third question we listed should be obvious. Whatever statements you examine in these supplementary presentations, we will not necessarily follow GAAP procedures or even corporate structure. Rather, we will attempt to lump major businesses activities in ways that aid analysis but do not swamp you with detail. Our goal is to give you important information in a form that we would wish to get it if our roles were reversed. On page 41 to 47, we show separate combined balance sheets and earning statements for one, our subsidiaries engaged in financial type operations, which are Mutual Savings and Scott Fitzer Financial; two, our insurance operations with their major investment position itemized; three, our manufacturing, publishing, and retailing businesses, leaving aside certain non-operating assets and purchase price accounting adjustments; and four, and all other categories that include non-operating assets, primarily marketable securities held by the companies in three, as well as various assets and debts of the Westco and Berkshire permanent parent companies. If you combine the earnings and the net worth of these four segments, you will derive totals matching those shown on our GAAP statements. However, we want to emphasize that our new presentation does not fall within the preview of our auditors, who in no way bless it. In fact, they may be horrified. I don't want to ask. I referred earlier to a major change in GAAP that is accepted in 1990. The change related to the calculations of deferred taxes and is both complicated and controversial, so much so that its imposition, originally scheduled for 1989, was postponed for a year. When implemented, the new rule will affect us in various ways. Most importantly, we will be required to change the way we calculate our liability for deferred taxes on the unrealized appreciation of stock held by insurance companies. Right now, our liability is layered. For the unrealized appreciation that dates back to 1986 and earlier years, $1.2 billion have been booked at 28% tax liability. For the unrealized appreciation buildup since $600 million, the tax liabilities has been booked at 34%. The difference reflects the increase in tax rates that went into effect in 1987. It now appears, however, that new accounting rules will require us to establish the entire liability at 34% in 1990, taking the charge against our earnings. Assuming no change in tax rates by 1990, this step will reduce our earnings in that year and thereby our reported net worth by $71 million. The purpose rule will also affect other items in our balance sheet, but these changes will only have a minor impact on earnings and net worth. We have no strong views about the desirability of this change in calculation of deferred taxes. We would point out, however, that neither a 28% nor a 34% tax liability precisely depicts economic reality at Berkshire, since we have no plans to sell the stock in which we have the great bulk of our gains. To those of you who are uninterested in accounting, I apologize for this dissertation. I realize that many of you do not pore over our figures, but instead hold Berkshire primarily because you know that 1. Charlie and I have the bulk of our money in Berkshire. 2. We intend to run things so that your gains or losses are in direct proportion to ours. And 3. The record has so far been satisfactory. There is nothing necessarily wrong with this kind of quote-unquote faith approach to investing. Other shareholders, however, prefer to quote-unquote analyze approach, and we want to supply the information they need. In our own investing, we search for situations in which both approaches give us the same answer. Sources of reported earnings. In addition to supplying you with our new four-sector accounting material, we will continue to list the major sources of Berkshire reported earnings just as we have in the past. In the following table, amortization of goodwill and other major purchases price accounting adjustments are not charged against the specific basis to which they apply, but are instead aggregated and shown separately. This procedure lets you view the earnings of our businesses as they would have been reported and had not purchased them. I've explained in the past reports why this form of presentation seems to us to be more useful to investors and managers than the standard GAAP presentation, which makes purchase price adjustment on a business-by-business basis. The total net earnings we show in the table are, of course, identical to the GAAP total in our audited financial statement. Further information about these businesses is given in the business segment section on page 32 to 34, and in the management discussion section on page 36 to 40. In these sections, you also will find our segment earnings reported on a GAAP basis. For information on Wesco's business, I urge you to read Charlie Munger's letter, which starts on page 52. It contains the best description I have seen of the events that produced the present savings and loan crisis. Also, take special note of Dave Hillstrom's performance at Precision Steel Warehouse, a Wesco subsidiary, precision operations in an extremely competitive industry. Yet Dave constantly achieves good returns on investment capital. Though data is lacking to prove the point, I think it is likely that his performance, both in 1988 and year past, would rank him number 1 in his peers. Okay. And so, like just before in the past ones, it has literally all the names. It has pre-tax earnings, current and past year, and Berkshire of net earnings after taxes, current and past year. And just like the past ones, we're just going to do the entitlement. So we're not reading every single line. So, pre-tax, current year 1988, $550,121, 87, $310,514, and then after taxes, 1988, $399,270, and after taxes, 87, $234,552. The earnings achieved by our operating businesses are superb, whether measured on an absolute basis or against those of their competitors. For that, we thank our operating managers. You and I are fortunate to be associated with them. At Berkshire, associations like these last a long time. We do not remove superstars from our lineup merely because they have attained a specific age. Whether the traditional 65 or the 95 reached by Mrs. B on the eve of Hanukkah in 1988, superb managers are too scarce a resource to be discarded simply because a cake gets crowded with candles. Moreover, our experience with newly minted MBAs has not been that great. Their academic records always look terrific, and the candidates always know just what to say. but too often they are short on personal commitment to the company and general business savvy. It's difficult to teach a new dog old tricks. Here's an update on our major non-insurance operations. At Nebraska Furniture Mart, Mrs. B, Rose Blumpkin, and her cart roll on and on. She's been the boss for 51 years, having started a business at 44 with $500. Think that, think what she would have done with 1,000. With Mrs. B, old age will always be 10 years away. That the Mart, long the largest home furnishing store in the country, continues to grow. In the fall, the store opened a detached 20,000 square foot clearance center, which expands our ability to offer bargains in all price ranges. Recently, Dillard's, one of the most successful department stores operations in the country, entered the Omaha market. In many of its stores, Dillard's runs a full furniture department, undoubtedly doing well in this lane. Shortly before opening in Omaha, however, William Dillard, chairman of the company, announced that his new store would not sell furniture. She said he, referring to NFM, quote, "We don't want to compete with them. We think they are about the best there is," end quote. At the Buffalo News, we extol the value of advertising, and our policies at NFM prove that we practice what we preach. Over the past 3 years, NFM has been the largest ROP advertiser in the Omaha World Herald. ROP advertising is the kind printed in paper as contrast to the pre-printed insert kind. In no other major market, to my knowledge, is a home furnishing operation that's leading customers to the newspaper. At times, we also run large ads in papers as far away as Des Moines, Sioux City, and Kansas City, always with good results. It truly does pay to advertise as long as you have something worthwhile to offer. Mrs. B's son, Louis, and his boys, Ron and Irv, complete the winning Bumpkin team. It's a joy to work with this family. All its members have character that matches their extraordinary abilities. Last year, I stated unequivocally that pre-tax margins at the Buffalo News would fall in 1988. That forecast would have proven correct at almost any other newspaper our size or larger. But Stan Lipsey, bless him, has managed to make me look foolish. Though we increased our prices a bit less than the industrial average last year, and though our newsprint costs and wage rates rose in line with industry norms, Stan actually improved margins a tad. No one in the newspaper business has a better managerial record. He has achieved it. Furthermore, while running a paper that gives readers an extraordinary amount of news, we believe that our quote-unquote news hole percentage, the portion of the paper devoted to news, is bigger than that of any other dominant paper of our size or larger. The percentage was 49.5% in 1988 versus 49.8% in 1987. We are committed to keeping it around 50%, whatever the level or trend of profit margins. Charlie and I have loved the newspaper business since we were youngsters, and we have had great fun with this news in the 12 years since we purchased it. We were fortunate to find Murray Light, a top flight editor, on the scene when we arrived, and he has made us proud of the paper ever since. See's Candy sold a record 25.1 million pounds in 1988. Prospects did not look good at the end of October, but excellent Christmas volume, considerably better than the record set in 1987, turned the tide. As we've told you before, See's business continues to become more Christmas concentrated. In 1988, the company earned a record 90% of its full year profit in December, $29 million out of $32.5 million before tax. It's enough to make you believe in Santa Claus. December's deluge of businesses produces a modest seasonal bulge in Berkshire's corporate earnings. Another small bulge occurs in the first quarter, when most World Book annuals are sold. Charlie and I put Chuck Huggins in charge of See's about 5 minutes after we bought the company. Upon reviewing his record, you may wonder what took us so long. At Fetchmere, the Heldmans, Bob, George, Gary, Roger, and Fred, are the Cincinnati Cincinnati counterparts of the Blumpkins. Neither furniture retailing nor uniform manufacturing has inherently attractive economics. In these businesses, only exceptional management can deliver high returns on investment capital, and that's exactly what the five Hellmans do. As Mets announcer Ralph Keener once said when comparing pitcher Steve Trout to his father, Dizzy Trout, the famous Detroit Tigers pitcher, quote, "There's a lot of heritage in that family," end quote. Fitchmere made a fairly good-sized acquisition in 1988. Charlie and I have such confidence in the business savvy of the Hellman family that we okayed the deal without even looking at it. There are very few managements anywhere, including those running the top-tier companies of the Fortune 500, in which we would exhibit similar confidence. Because of both this acquisition and some internal growth, sales at Fitchmere should be up significantly in 1989. All of the operations managed by Ralph Ski, World Book Kirby, and the Scott's Fisher Manufacturing Group performed splendidly in 1988. Returns on the capital entrusted in to Ralph continued to be exceptional. Within the Scott Fisher Manufacturing Group, particularly fine progress was recorded at its largest unit, Campbell Hausfield. This company, the country's leading producer of small and medium-sized air compressors, has more than doubled earnings since 1986. Unit sales at both Kirby and World Book were up significantly in 1988. With report businesses particularly strong, World Book became available in the Soviet Union in September. When that country's largest American bookstore opened in Moscow, ours is the only general encyclopedia offered at the store. Ralph's personal productivity is amazing. In addition to running 19 businesses in superb fashion, he is active at the Cleveland Clinic, Ohio University, Case Western Reserve, and a venture capital operation that has spawned 16 Ohio-based companies and resurrected many others. Both Ohio and Berkshire are fortunate to have Ralph on their side. Borsheim's. It was in 1983 that Berkshire purchased an 80% interest in the Nebraska Furniture Mart. The chairman blundered then by neglecting to ask Mrs. B a question any schoolboy should have thought of. Quote, "Are there any more at home like you?" End quote. Last month I corrected the error. We are now 80% partners with another branch of the family. After Mrs. B came over from Russia in 1917, her parents and 5 siblings followed. Her 2 other siblings have preceded her. Among the sisters was Rebecca Friedman, who, with her husband Louis, escaped in 1922 to the west through Latvia, and a journey as perilous as Mrs. B's earlier odyssey to the east through Manchuria. When the family members reunited in Omaha, they had no tangible assets. However, they came equipped with an extraordinary combination of brains, integrity, and enthusiasm for work, and that's all they needed. They have since provided themselves invincible. In 1948, Mr. Friedman purchased Borsheim's, a small Omaha jewelry store. He was joined in the business by his son, Ike, in 1950, and as the years went by, Ike's son Alan and his sons-in-law, Marvin Cohn and Donald Yale, come in also. You won't be surprised to learn that this family brings to the jewelry businesses precisely the same approach that the Blumpkins bring to the furniture business. The cornerstone for both enterprises in Mrs. B's cred, quote, "sell cheap and tell the truth," end quote. Other fundamentals at both businesses are 1. Single store operation featuring huge inventories and provide customers with an enormous selection across all price ranges. 2. Daily attention to detail by top management. 3. Rapid turnover. 4. Shrewd buying. And 5. Incredibly low expenses. The combination of the last 3 factors lets both stores offer everyday prices that no one in the country comes close to matching. Most people, no matter how sophisticated they are in other matters, feel like babies in the woods when purchasing jewelry. They can judge neither quality nor price. For them, only one rule makes sense. If you don't know jewelry, know the jeweler. I can assure you that those who put their trust in Ike Friedman and his family will never be disappointed. The way in which he purchases our interest in their business is the ultimate testimonial. Borsheim's had no audited financial statements. Nevertheless, we didn't take an inventory, verify receivables, or audit the operations in any way. Ike simply told us what was so, and on that basis, we drew up a one-page contract and wrote a large check. Businesses at Borsheim's has mushroomed in recent years as the reputation of the Friedman family has spread. Customers now come to the store from all over the country. Among them have been some friends of mine from both coasts who thanked me later for getting them there. Borsheim's new links to Berkshire will change nothing in the way this business is run. All members of the Friedman family will continue to operate just as they have before. Charlie and I will stay on the sidelines where we belong, and when we say, quote, all members, end quote, the words have real meaning. Mr. and Mrs. Friedman, at 88 and 87 respectively, are in the store daily. The wives of Ike, Alan, Marvin, and Donald will pitch in at busy times, and a fourth generation is beginning to learn the ropes. It is great fun to be in business with people you have long admired. The Fredmans, like the Bumpkins, have achieved success because they have deserved success. Both families focus on what's right for the customer, and that, inevitably, works out well for them. Also, we couldn't have better partners. Insurance operations. Shown below is an updated version of our usual table presented key figures of the insurance industry. So again, we're just going to go over past year and current year, and the current year is an estimate, not because they, have to re-go over everything at the end of the year, at the end of the next year. Yearly change in premiums, 87, 9.4, 88, 3.9. Stationary combined ratio after policyholder dividend, 87, 104.6, 88, 105.4. Yearly change in incurred losses, 87, 7.8, 88, 4.2. Inflation rate measured by GNP deflator, 3.3 for 87 and 3.6 for 88. Sources AM Best Co. The combined the combined ratio represents total insurance costs, losses incurred plus expenses. Compared to revenue from premiums, a ratio below 100 indicates an underwriting profit and one above 100 indicates a loss. When the investment income that an insurer earns from holdings on the policyholder's funds, quote unquote the float, is taken into account, a combined ratio in the 107 to 111 range typically produces an overall break-even result exclusive of earnings on the funds provided by shareholders. For the reason laid out in previous reports, we expect that industry's incurred losses to growth by about 10% annually, even in years when general inflation runs considerably lower. If premiums growth, meanwhile, materially lags that 10% rate, underwriting losses will mount. Though the industry's tendency to under-reserve when businesses turn bad may obscure their size for a time. As the table shows, the industry's underwriting loss grew in 1988. This trend is almost certain to continue, and probably will accelerate for at least 2 more years. The property casualty insurance industry is not only subnormally profitable, it is subnormally popular. As Sam Goldwyn philosophized, quote, in life, one must learn to take the bitter with the sour, end quote. One of the ironies of the business is that many relative unprofitable industries that are plagued by inadequate prices habitually find themselves beat up upon by irate customers, even while other hugely profitable industries are spared complaints, no matter how high their prices. Take the breakfast cereal industry, whose return on investment capital is more than double that of the auto insurance industry. which is why companies like Kellogg's and General Mills sell at 5 times book value and most large insurers sell close to book. The cereal companies regularly impose price increases, few of them related to a significant jump in their costs. Yet, not a peep is heard from customers. But when auto insurances raise prices by amounts that do not even match cost increases, customers are outraged. If you want to be loved, it's clearly better to sell high priced cornflakes than low priced auto insurance. The antagonism that the public feels towards the industry can have serious consequences. Proposition 103, a California initiative passed last fall, threatens to push auto insurance prices down sharply. Even though costs have been soaring, the price cuts has been suspended while the courts review the initiative. But the resentment that brought on the vote has not been suspended. Even if the initiative is overturned, insurers are likely to find it tough to operate profitably in California. Thank heavens to the citizenry isn't mad at bamboo. Bam- Thank heavens this is the citizenry isn't mad at bonbons. If pro- Proposition 103 applied to candy as well as insurance, Sears would be forced to sell its product for $5.76 per pound rather than the $7.06 we charge, and would be losing money by the bucketful. The immediate direct effect of Berkshire from the initiative are minor. Since we saw few opportunities for profit in the rate structure that existed in California prior to the vote, however, the forcing down of prices would seriously affect Geico, our 44% owned investee, which gets about 10% of its premium volumes from California. Even more threatening to Geico is the possibility that similar pricing actions will be taken in other states there through either initiatives or legislation. If voters insist that auto insurance be priced below cost, it eventually must be sold by government. Stockholders can subsidize policyholders for a short period, but only taxpayers can subsidize them over the long term. At most property casualty companies, socialized auto insurance would be no disaster for shareholders. Because of the commodity characteristics of the industry, most insurers earn mediocre returns and therefore have little or no economic goodwill to lose if they are forced by government to leave the auto insurance business. But Geico, because it is a low cost producer able to earn high returns on equity, has a huge amount of economic goodwill to risk. In turn, so do we. At Berkshire, in 1988, our premium volume continued to fall, and in 1989, we will experience a large decrease for a special reason. The contract through which we receive 7% of business of Fireman's Fund expires on August 31st, and at the time, we will return to Fireman's Fund the unearned premiums we hold that relate to the contract. This transfer of funds will show up in our quote unquote premium written account as a negative $85 million or so, and will take our third quarter figures look and make our third quarter figures look rather peculiar. However, the termination of this contract will not have a significant effect on profits. Berkshire's underwriting results continued to be excellent in 1988. Our combined ratio on a statutory basis and excluding structured settlements and financial reassurance was 104. Reserve development was favorable for the second year in a row, after a stirring of years in which it was very unsatisfactory. Details on both underwriting and reserve development appear on page 36 to 38. Our insurance volume over the next few years is likely to run very low, since businesses with a reasonable potential for profit will almost certainly be scarce. So be it. At Berkshire, we simply will not write policies at rates that carry the expectations of economic losses. We encounter enough troubles when we expect a gain. Despite our, or perhaps because of low volume, our profit picture during the next few years is apt to be considerably brighter than the industry's. we are sure to have an exceptional amount of float compared to premium volume, and that argues well for profits. In 1989 and 1990, we expect our float premiums ratio to be at least 3 times that of the typical property casualty company. Mike Goldburn, with special help from Ajit Jain, Dinos Dinos Iridanos, and the National and Endemic Managerial Team, has positioned us well in that respect. At some point, we don't know when, we will be deluged with insurance businesses. The cause will probably be some major physical or financial catastrophe. But we could also experience an explosion in business, as we did in 1985, because large and increasing underwriting losses at other companies coincide with their recognition that they are far under-reserved. In the meantime, we will retain our talented professionals, protect our capital, and try not to make major mistakes. We're going to put a pause there. Don't forget to come back tomorrow if you find this on YouTube, don't forget to come back tomorrow so you can read part 2 with me, Berkshire Hathaway 1988. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon down below so that way you know every single time when I post. And give a little comment. Let me know, what do you think about this? Do we prefer this type with like the camera here a little bit closer, a little bit on the side than we do the one on my computer? Should I keep doing this even after we're back from Mexico? Let me know. And go check out my links. I have some merch set up and I'll be continuing to updates on that. Let me know if there's something you specifically want to know. And I have donations there so you guys can support me, and maybe we'll get, I don't know, a Ko-Fi or whatever those things are called, so you guys can see behind the scenes and save videos and stuff. We'll see where we're going with it. But until next time, bye.